Let's get it. This is Life's Essential Ingredients with Jeff and a Mike, where we hope to inform, inspire, and transform lives, one essential ingredient at a time. Welcome to the show. Oh yeah, we're back, baby. And I should say, I'm back. My Pasho, I miss you. He's in Mexico, though, vacationing. But life goes on. We got to keep going. We are season 3, episode 20 of Life's Essential Ingredients. I cannot believe it. Yeah. And our guest, if you're just listening, she's clapping for us. And we do have a YouTube channel that we broadcast these. And we are so lucky to have Amanda Kate coming from Melbourne, Australia today. And a little bit before we get into the show, a lot of people don't know because I'm terrible at telling people who we are, but we are C4 Leaders, and that's a grassroots nonprofit. And we're the only nonprofit to utilize the pizza making process to create space for our companions to be seen, heard, and loved. We write children's books. We just dropped our second one, June 23rd. So excited about that story, Lucy's Secret Sauce. And you can go to pizzadays.org to check that out, or anywhere else where you can purchase a book. We obviously host this podcast, and then we use the most amazing handmade, hand-tossed sourdough pizza to bring out the best in each other. So again, check us out, c4leaders.org or pizzadays.org. So about our guest, first, best place to find her is just through her website, amandakate.com.au, and it's amandakate.com.au. So about our guest, through the process of becoming a kinesiologist, Amanda has dedicated her life to continually learning about holistic health and related topics by uncovering, I love that word, her own limiting beliefs and negative behavior patterns, and continuing her personal growth and expansion. Amanda helps clients through physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual malaise, including PTSD, complex trauma, ending abuse cycles, and assisting people through grief. In addition to trauma, Amanda also works with people to improve their life, achieve their life goals, and navigate transitional situations with as much ease and grace as possible. Amanda is the author of 2 books, Divine, Messy Human, a spiritual guide to prioritizing internal truth over external influence, and her second book, The Anxiety Relief Handbook. If that wasn't enough, Amanda is also the host of her own podcast, the Hello Divine Messy Humans. Amanda, thanks for sharing your many gifts with the world and for being our guest on Life's Essential Ingredients. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. It's always strange hearing all that stuff read out, because I guess when you're living your own life, you just do the things like, you with all the pizzas and the books and the, nonprofits and all of the different things. I guess when you get the list, it's like, oh goodness, I guess I've done a bit.
Yeah. And I kind of messed yours up a little bit. I'm stuttering and no, the words aren't flowing up as I would like, but that's the way it goes. But I love doing that introduction because it just allows people to kind of sit back, and I think so many times our brain is just programmed to look at the things that we haven't done or that we're not doing or that we're coming up short with. And so I kind of put it on a little bit thick, and people can get a little bit riled up with me sometimes. Like, man, your intros are so long. Well, when else do you have the time to have someone just say, man, I appreciate you. And here's some of the things that you're doing. And I think it's important for the listeners. And thank you, listeners. We got listeners in 41 countries, over 602 cities. And so we thank you for tuning into another episode, but for them to understand who you are and the body of your work, because it's called Life's Essential Ingredients. And you're going to be dropping so many things that have been essential in your life and making mistakes and taking steps towards figuring life out. And that's why I love this show, because it's just a genuine look, just sitting down with one guest and saying, hey, let's just figure this thing out and let's share it with the world. So let's go.
Yeah, let's.
All right. So we always start each episode with a thought of the day, and we're season 3, episode 20, over, I don't know, maybe 130 episodes or so. I don't really keep track, but we're 100% on these quotes And that just means that they resonate with the guest. So you can say, Jeff, you were smoking some stuff, man. Your streak stops today. So just be honest if I'm right or not correct with this thought of the day. And it's from Rick Warren, who's an author as well. And here it goes. Transformation is a process. And as life happens, there are tons of ups and downs. It is a journey of discovery. There are moments on mountaintops and moments in deep valleys of despair. Why would I pick that one for you?
Because that pretty much sums up both my life and my life work. So, yeah, spot on again. Yeah, it was interesting actually when I was going through, I guess, the toughest part of my life in terms of the divorce and navigating that and setting up life again, having not been in the workforce because I was a stay-at-home mom, and setting up a new business and learning new skills and doing all of this stuff. I used to joke that I was, bouncing along rock bottom and thinking I was about to start climbing out, and then I'd find a whole new level to drop into. But also there are the mountaintops in there as well of just joy and, connection and knowing that I was doing the right thing and on the right path. So I think it really sums it up. And the fact that it's a journey. I called my book Divine Messy Human for a reason.
I love it. I love it. I'm so excited to learn from you and have you share your life and your expertise with the listeners. And I listened in to your podcast, and it was so cool. I just listened to one episode, but I don't know if you have guests or you just talk. The one that I listened to, you were just kind of speaking from your heart and just talking about life. And so listeners, make sure you check that out. Again,
I alternate. So I do one individual and one with a guest.
Yeah. So, no, I really loved what you were sharing. So
thank you.
Divine Messy Humans. Check out Amanda's podcast. Really good content. So, hey, so we always, start out and you can take this question any which way you want from any part of your life, but what was life like growing up?
I'm going to take it in a bit of a different direction today, actually. And it comes from something a client said to me in our introductory call, because I've never heard anyone else kind of describe it that way. And that was exactly how I spoke about my life for so many years. I felt like I was supporting actress in my own life for most of my life. Every time I got close to center stage, I would be shoved into the sidelines or thrown in the orchestra pit or kicked out of the theater or whatever it was. And I lived my life thinking that that was it, that I was never supposed to be center stage, that I just wasn't that kind of person. And it led to me, because I believed that of myself, it led to me accepting some pretty tough relationships. I was in an emotionally abusive marriage that I didn't know was emotionally abusive because it was my normal. And so I lived that way for over 14 years with this constant criticism, this constant changing of the goalposts. I was always walking on eggshells. I never knew what to expect. And I'd always done the right thing. I was from a white Church of England, middle-class family. It was guilt, shame, blame. If you don't behave, it's because you're not good enough. And if you're not getting good enough grades at school, and there was always these tight parameters, and especially as a female, of how we needed to behave, how we needed to be in public, how we needed to be with other people. And I ticked all those boxes because I was a people pleaser. And I wanted to make sure that everybody around me was happy. And some of that came from the fact that my mum had some pretty big hormonal issues when I was growing up. And I feel her because I followed in her footsteps, and it's pretty horrible. But it meant that there was explosiveness, once a month. And that used to terrify me as a little child. I understand it now, of course, as an adult. But as a little child, that was quite scary. And so I'd do whatever I could to make her happy, because I didn't want to see her in that way. And I didn't want to be on the receiving end of her in that way. And like I say, completely and utterly loving lady, and I completely understand it. But from that child perspective, it was pretty scary. So I just fell into that people pleasing. And my sister was very independent and demanding. And my mother always said she was born to be an only child. Now, that was because she was such a big personality. But as a result of both her being that way and me being told she was born to be an only child, I sort of figured that perhaps I was a bit of a mistake, and, therefore I had to try even harder to be the good girl, to fit into, the paradigms that I was expected to fit in. And that really continued throughout my life. I got good grades in high school. I went to university. I got good grades. I went and worked for my dad. I went traveling with my sister because she asked me to. Everything was done because of other people and for other people. And then when I got married, it just continued, but it got really dark. There were times that he'd ask me my opinion on something and I'd tell him, and then he'd argue and argue and argue until literally I was in tears. And then he'd go, "Oh, I have the same belief you do. I just wanted to play devil's advocate." And I'd be like, "That's a really cruel game to play." But I didn't get how cruel it was and how severe all this stuff was, because again, it was my normal, it was my daily existence. The criticisms and "You've done this so well, this is amazing, you're incredible." And then the next day I'd do a similar thing and it'd be, "You are the worst human in the world, you're a terrible mother, you're a terrible human." And so it was always letting other people have center stage and giving them center stage and giving my power away all the time. And eventually I got really sick. I got chronic fatigue and things needed to change. And through that, with Western health effectively failing me, because they were doing all the blood tests saying, "You're the healthiest sick person we know." They were sending me to a few different specialists, but they're all kind of drawing blanks. It was when I went to a gynecologist, because I'd been suffering 13 days a month with my menstrual cycle, which for any woman out there is not normal. Get it checked out. And he went to hand me antidepressants. He said, "There's nothing more we can do. Try these." And I'm going, I don't think that's the problem. But it was the biggest gift because it pushed me more down the natural therapies route. I started working with a naturopath and a chiropractor and a Chinese doctor and an acupuncturist, and I was getting regular cupping, and I was working with a PT. And so all of these other little bits started coming together, and I started finding a bit of wellness. And then I found kinesiology through my psychologist, funnily enough. And her receptionist had told me it was about a month before I could get in with the psychologist and about 6 weeks till I could get into her mindfulness course. She said, "We've got a kinesiologist on staff. Would you try that?" And kinesiology, when I speak about, is energetic kinesiology. It's about the energy systems of the body and how the energy is moving within your body, because our body has an innate ability to heal itself. And I had no idea what it was. And I went, "Fine, book me in. I am desperate. I need to fix myself because I am broken." And she booked me in, and that first session just changed my life. She said, "You have no idea how emotionally abused you are, do you?" And I could see it in some major relationships, but it took me 4 months to see that my biggest abuser was in my bed. It took me another 4 months to leave the marriage, but 6 months after my very first session, I was sitting in the classroom studying it because it just blew my mind. And I went, right. It was me stepping up and going, I don't want to be a supporting actor for the next, what was I at the time? I think I was 36, 37. I didn't want to be that for the rest of my life. I wanted to actually be able to be the person who my life revolved around. So, yeah, it just led to some massive changes, and it's been incredible.
Man. Yeah, just deep already, and appreciate you being so vulnerable and just giving your history and your journey that I'm sure put you in a position to be such a powerful kinesiologist. And yeah, I'm glad you shared the definition of that, because that was going to be one of my questions for you. I'm a nurse is what I've done for 29 years, and kinesiologist, out here in the States, I don't even know how to define it, but it's someone that studies, how the human body moves, and they could go into like athletic training. They could take that degree and get into physical therapy or physical therapy assistant. But I like how you kind of broadened it and talked about it's the energy systems of the body, which is, probably a little bit different than over here.
Yeah. I mean, we do the movement of the physical body as well, because obviously the emotional, psychological, spiritual, mental, all of that stuff manifests in the physical body. Most of my physical dis-ease and lack of wellness was created from the psychological, emotional, and mental abuse. And it just started to manifest in the physical body. And this is why Western medicine wasn't able to really find anything, because the physical body itself wasn't the main problem. And so we do look at the way people, stand and move and all of that sort of stuff. You look at people with rounded shoulders, oftentimes they're protecting their heart. And it was interesting. I still remember the day I got picked up when I was 15 in a doctor's office, and she said, "You've got such rounded shoulders." But being a tall woman, I'm 5'10", my shoulders were rounded, one, because I was embarrassed of being tall, and two, I was protecting my heart. There was one day after I'd been on this path for probably 3 years, and I was in the shower and I caught sight of myself in the shower screen. And I went, "Oh, my shoulders are back." Mm. And it was the first time it felt freer. I was fine expressing my heart and allowing that heart out into the world all of a sudden. And it was just fascinating, seeing the change in the physical body, because we've been working on these energetic structures and working on all of those different layers of the human body. And I absolutely love it. And I love movement in general, because we are constantly energy and movement. And so, yeah, but I do like to kind of get that in, because obviously the idea in the States is very different of kinesiology.
Man, I'm going to go a little bit off topic here
go.
But I'm just fascinated with your history, and I'm reading a really good book that I just started, Effective Neuroscience, and it's by Jan Skeep, and it's deep. It's the hardest book I've ever read in my life, and you got to read and the font's like size 6. And, you got to look up about 20 words on each page. But he's really looking at how we've evolved, as a species, and I'm just thinking about your mom and how she kind of lived in the darkness and probably carried a lot of these same things that perhaps you were carrying, which is genetically how it was passed down to you. And then who knows if her mom or someone in her family back in the day. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is, how empowering is it for you to take a step back, to uncover your limiting beliefs and your negative behavior patterns, and say, you know what, I'm going to choose to break this cycle. And you won't even see the dividends on what you've done, not to sound too morbid, but it's going to be your great grandkids that your genetic profile is changing and has changed, which is going to totally influence so many lives down the road. And so I just want to say thanks for that, because that's just what we need to do. And that influence, you just have no idea of the ripple effect that by you doing all this work is going to have on your family members who you'll never even get to meet.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting you talk about the neuroscience. We do a lot in neuroscience, in quantum physics, in working in the quantum field. We look at a lot of that. The fact that, say Tesla, everything is energy and vibration. We're looking at the vibrational structures of our being. So all of the work that I do now, because the only moment that exists is this present moment, to get completely esoteric with you straight off the bat. So I am affecting everyone who has come before me and everyone who comes after me in my genetic line. And according to what we have tested up in my kinesiology sessions, I'm breaking around 8 generations worth of patterning with what I'm doing. And when you think about the way we come into this world, we were obviously eggs in our mother's womb. Our mother is born with all of the eggs that she is ever going to have. So we have, as an energetic creation, as that egg, we've been in our grandmother. So whilst our grandmother is pregnant, we are collecting her cellular resonance in us. We're then in our mother her entire life, or we're in our mother our entire life until she gives birth to us. So we've got all of that conditioning as well, all of that cellular resonance, all of that vibrational frequency. And then when we're born, children are actually in their mother's energy field for about the first 7 years of life. So that first 7 year cycle, they are still effectively part of their mother's energy field. And this is why I lovingly say that children go through that asshole phase when they're between 7 and 8, where they're really pushing boundaries and they kind of don't know where they stop and other people begin. And that's because of this separation in energy fields. And so when you think of all of that harmonic resonance that we're carrying, it makes sense that it gets passed down. And what does the Bible say? It's about 7 generations on the father's side is what they say it is. Because of the way the egg is held, we have as much, if not more, influence coming down that maternal side because we've actually been in those bodies. And so it gets carried down because there's not really that break in lineage from when that mother creates the egg in her womb space within her own mother's womb space. And that in itself just blew my mind because, my grandmother lived through the war in Holland and there would have been a whole heap of stuff that she went through with that. And then obviously my mother's been in that and obviously been in her grandmother who, had her own trials and tribulations and, so on and so forth. And I think when we start to think of this energetic enmeshment and entanglement, not just with our own family, but then also with all those people that we interact with, you can understand why we end up as energetic beings carrying so much stuff within us. And because we're social creatures who want to be accepted by our tribe, because obviously we were all originally tribes people, we want to be accepted by our tribe, because if we weren't accepted by our tribe, we were cast out into the wilderness and we would die. Now, our brain physiology still looks at the fact that if we're not loved and accepted by those around us, we're going to be cast out into the wilderness and die, because our brain is black and white. Yet we know that life is nuanced and it's beyond duality and there's all of these different ways that we can look at things, but our brain goes into that. So of course our body goes into fight and flight. And when we're constantly concerned about our place in the world, then we stay in that fight and flight system a lot longer than we perhaps need to or want to. So looking at all of those bits, you can understand how we're so complicated as humans.
Which is what I love to do. I mean, we're speaking the same language. I mean, I agree with everything that you shared and definitely have some similar knowledge around that same space. I think you're probably a little bit deeper, but yeah, it's just fascinating to me in why I'm so passionate about the work that our nonprofit is doing and the work that you're doing, because you just want to transfer a little bit of that culture, which you can influence, which culture slash, environment, the nature versus nurture kind of piece of things. And it is on all of us to say, man, life is rough. I mean, everything you just talked about is basically we're just saying, yeah, it's messy,
Yeah.
And if we continue to stay in that messy space without experiencing joy and love and happiness and everything else, then it just that cannonball effect just sucks the life out of everything versus the positive ripple effect of, well, let me share the good things that are going on, but it's about trying to get into that space and then share it and kind of understand who you are, how you've evolved, and then to make a choice, it's one day, that we have. And yeah, you're getting me all riled up and I love it.
I love it.
I
think it's amazing.
let's get into you, because the show is called Life's Essential Ingredients. We're going to change it up here a little bit. And obviously you've transformed and you've evolved. That doesn't happen overnight. And it's a continuous practice, I'm sure, where you have to be mindful and catch yourself of perhaps drifting off and getting away from the things that allow you to be present. So my question is, what's your day look like? How do you structure yourself to be present and maintain your self-awareness and to give yourself grace? And I'm kind of talking about your routine, on the daily, that perhaps a listener can take in and say, okay, I can maybe incorporate one or two of those things. If Amanda is in a good space, I would love to try and learn from her and incorporate that in my life.
I think the first thing is it's a choice. Because of the nature of my work, it's not always routinized. So I don't have a set 9 to 5 work day or anything like that. I mean, I'm up at 5:15 in the morning speaking to you across the other side of the world. So, on a day like today, I will get up, I'll do the podcast interview or whatever it is that I've got going. Sometimes I'll do some journaling. Sometimes I'll just have some contemplation time. Sometimes I'll stay in bed and kind of meditate on, what I'm doing and just have that. I don't always like to call it meditation because I thought I was doing it wrong when I first started meditating because I didn't have the visions and do all of the stuff. But it's recognizing the thoughts that are going on. It's just observing how your body's feeling, what your breath's doing, what your thoughts are doing. And then I tend to direct myself into, what do I want to achieve today? How do I want to be of service today? What am I going to choose today for my life to end up better when I go to bed tonight than it did when I first woke up this morning? I always take my dog for a good couple of hour walk. So it tends to be, I leave home, I walk about 7.5K on the beach every day, rain, hail, shine. It's every day, non-negotiable. Some days it's really hard. And some days it is just the most magnificent thing ever. I've had days where I'm almost walking on an angle up the beach because the wind is so strong and I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? But it is my non-negotiable. If I don't get to do that, I notice an energy shift in not just me, but also the dog. And so that's a really big non-negotiable. Sometimes I'll do a Pilates class at, 6 a.m. and walk him after. Other times I'll walk him and go to a 9:30 class. Other times, it just depends on how my day's unfolding. And then I get into client work. I get into my work. As you know, with running a business and being the head of that, there is a lot of work that you don't get paid for. So there's also a lot of that management. And then it's also running the family. And so throughout my day, I try and sprinkle little bits of my self-care, of my spiritual work, of my beingness. I make sure that, when I go and make a cup of tea, I'll take, a few deep breaths and settle back into my body. I might grab an essential oil and, test up which one I need and then, read the message from that. Or I might do some cards or something to just go, okay, what's going on? What am I not seeing? And so there's this almost constant state of, where am I at? What's my body feeling like? What's my energy doing? Where am I at? And then where do I want to be? And what do I need to do to shift that? How am I struggling? Why am I struggling? If I am struggling, do I need to see an external professional to help me shift this, or is this something I need to do on my own? And so there's a lot of self-reflection, a lot of contemplation, a lot of me time. I used to be really out there, and the more I've done this work, the more internal I've gone. And I think because I'm working with people in trauma a lot, with people who, and the good stuff too, don't get me wrong, it's not all, hard and traumatic, but I work with a lot of trauma. I work with people who are moving through their issues, and I want to make sure that I am also working through whatever's holding me back, so that A, it doesn't influence my client sessions, and B, that I am staying 1 or 2 steps ahead of where I need to be for my clients. So there's a lot of those sorts of things that come into the day, but call it meditation, journaling, self-reflection, walking, time in nature. Oh my goodness, so much time in nature. Eating healthily. I'm actually on a water fast at the moment. I'm getting towards the end of it. I've done about 41 hours at the moment. So every fortnight, I'm working through a water fast of about 40 hours just to clear the system, give myself a break, be more mindful then of what I am eating when I'm eating. So there's a lot of different practices. But one of the things I say to people is, if we did all of the spiritual practices that we've learned, we'd never get anything done, including sleep. So we need to choose the ones that fit into our schedule, that do not feel like stress by us adding them, and that we enjoy doing. So my beach walk is a non-negotiable, because even the days where it is terribly hard and I don't want to be there and it's cold and it's raining, I still feel better after it. even when my legs are aching and I don't think I'm going to even make it up there. And halfway point, I get a really nice chai latte, almond chai. So, there is an incentive of walking up that far. But again, having that beautiful walk, it gets me grounded, it gets me into my body, it gets me connected with nature. And I feel differently than going into my day. So just picking those things. The other thing I do is a ritual shower every time I'm in the shower. I'm cleansing off not just the physical body, but I'm imagining that water cleansing through my entire energy being, getting rid of anything that doesn't belong to me and allowing that to transmute and transform into something else. So there's lots and lots of little bits, but it's about putting them in throughout the day rather than feeling like I've got this 3-hour spiritual practice that takes up, a lot of time and energy and effort and feels like a chore.
Man, you said so much right there. But some great tips and insight, and really the whole time you're sharing, I just keep thinking, man, you just have so much love for yourself, and then my nursing part of me comes out and just self-care, and it's so important. We always put ourselves last, and I'm sure a lot of your practices now have to do with where you came from, how you were always, second stage and never in the space that you wanted to be in, pleasing so many other people. And now you're in position to be able to do that and realizing that, and the more I take care of myself, the better care I can provide to other people. And I think so many times we get that a little bit twisted and we don't realize it. And I've been serving everybody else, but now all of a sudden I'm empty and I have nothing left for me. Therefore, and we're just the ones that can't see it. I get wrapped up in this, that we can't see that I'm the shell of my former self. And now I'm thinking that I'm still doing, what I should be doing, but it's just not fulfilling me the same way that it used to. And so, you just being in your own mind in the best possible way and constantly being self-aware is pretty remarkable. And thank you for sharing that. But I do want to get into, this show is going to be all over the place. So listeners, just hold on a little bit. You talked about that you work, with all different kind of clients, but, people that have experienced trauma, and we won't necessarily get into defining that. And I know that can be very broad, but what is, I guess specifically I'll ask, I guess this might be wrong too. I'm trying to find the right words, but I think so many times traumas happen and forgiveness has to be part of that. Where does that come in? Or am I even, kind of misspeaking? And I'm talking about even forgiving ourselves, for things that we're carrying. But, where would you help someone that's experienced a trauma and see if forgiveness is even any part of that?
I think forgiveness is always part of it. And I'm not a big fan of forgiveness. I know that sounds really crazy, but I'm a fan of paradox because multiple things can be true at the same time. And I think through the work that I've done, for example, all of those people who have abused me, I can hold in this space where I have love for them. I have love for them as a soul being. I have love for them as a human being who's just doing the best they can in this really tough world. And also I can hold wrath for what they've done, for their actions, and not condone their behaviors. Often I think people think that forgiveness means, well, I forgive you and it's a free pass, and it's so complicated. I think for forgiveness to happen, we often need to move through grief, and we don't do that very well. And I will define trauma just for the audience, because I think it's really important to know. And there's a lot of research coming out about this at the moment. I spoke to a psychologist the other day. She's like, that's not trauma. And I'm going, the latest research actually agrees that it is. Trauma is anything that we experience and store in our body as less than nourishing and nurturing for us. So overly critical parents can be a traumatic event if that's the way we store it. If we end up doing everything in our life to avoid that criticism and to people please and to over perfection everything, that ends up as a trauma response to this. And I want to use that one because it's not what we would consider that big T trauma. It's more of a trouble in our life or whatever people want to call it. But it is the way our body stores it, and it's the way we then create our life around it and the stories we tell ourselves around it as well. And so those traumas I look at like the rocks that you see by the seaside where you can see the layers, and we're just shoving them down because we don't want to admit that. So I'm going to, pull up my bootstraps and get on with it, and I'm going to just do better next time. And so a lot of those sorts of things come up. Now, I know, and it was one of the hardest things I had to move through. I still remember this day that all of a sudden the realization hit. I was free to leave my marriage every single day that I was in it. I knew where the door was. I could have walked out and sorted out the stuff later. I didn't choose to. And I never thought when I was in that marriage that I had a choice. When you get married, you stay, and that is just what we do. Now, recognizing that obviously took a fair bit of internal work. I needed to understand a lot of things about myself, about my conditioning, about my past, about my ex, about my family, about all of that for me to get to that point. So I think a lot of people kind of want to move through the trauma and they think that it's just this, quick fix, and we can do this nervous system hack, and everyone wants the pill that's going to fix it. But we need to move through the layers. And our nervous system can't always handle just, shoving an explosive in that rock and blowing the whole thing up. We need to kind of, excavate the site a little bit more calmly so that our nervous system can handle it. So when you pull in, I had a lot of self-forgiveness to do. And if anything, I had to forgive myself more than anybody else because I was the reason that I was in that marriage. Nobody forced me to be there. I used my free will choice. Now, was that choice jaded? Yeah, of course it was. Are there a lot of regrets I have in my life? Hell yes, there are. And I don't have a problem having regrets because regrets mean I'm going to live my future differently. I also don't live in those regrets, but those regrets help inform my future choices and the choices I make today. So there's this big, I guess, mishmash of energy there. We do need to work on forgiveness. We also need to do a lot of grieving. I needed to grieve so many aspects of myself. I needed to grieve the woman who was no longer a mother. I needed to grieve the woman who walked down that aisle and thought that her life was going to be different. I needed to grieve the person I could have been in that marriage. I needed to grieve the person he could have been in that marriage. The team we could have been had things been different. I had to grieve the fact that I was no longer a wife, that I was no longer a full-time mother, that I had been a full-time mother. I had been basically acting as their only parent for the first 10 years of my eldest child's life. And all of a sudden, I knew I was leaving them with someone who was a bully. And I had to grieve all of that as well. And I had to move through this place of acceptance and forgiveness to understand why I was doing what I was doing. Because it wasn't easy. They weren't easy steps to do. So I think it is all absolutely tied together. So I think your question is beautiful because what we don't do well in the Western world is grief. And we don't realize how many aspects that we have to grieve. The person I am today is not the person I was yesterday, is not the person I was, 3 weeks ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago. And I need to grieve every time I transform and change, because even though I'm growing into a person I am happy with and proud of and love deeply, there's still these previous iterations that I will never be again. And so we need to be able to move through that grief and accept that we've always done the best we could in any given moment, which in itself can take a couple of sessions to work through, just people accepting that. Because even when I have been my most unresourceful, even when I have been the abuser, because let's face it, when you're in an abusive relationship, you are the abuser a lot of the time because you're just wanting attention. You are just wanting to feel like you exist. And so you start the abuse cycle because you are so desperate to be validated that you're alive. So even those times, I've had to work through forgiveness of that. I've been the abuser. I've not just been the abused. I've traumatized my children. I've not always been loving and nurturing and, the perfect ideal archetypal mother. I've shouted and screamed and probably frightened the shit out of them more than one occasion. And that's something that I've spoken to them about. And I'm like, anytime you want to work through it in therapy, I'm happy to go with you. I know I've traumatized you. I know I've not always been a great mother. So, I'm always happy to work with you on it. But it is such a multifaceted thing. And I think this is why I love the work that I do, because it does pull in the mind, the body, the spirit, the emotions, the mental self. It pulls in every aspect of the human being to look at all of these aspects from all of those different angles so that we can gain this greater understanding and acceptance. Because let's face it, we can't change what's happened. All we can do is accept the person we were then and make a different choice to heal and to listen to what's going on under the surface that created those patterns in the first place.
Love it. And again, just appreciate you sharing your life with the listeners. And I was going to ask you not specifically about your children, but I'm sure there's listeners that can resonate with what you're sharing and how difficult life is and how you're in this space, we'll just say, and realizing that your children are, bearing some of that abuse, and it's gonna come out. And what tip would you have if there is someone that's listening that's in that space now and they see the effect that it's having on their children? What would you tell them to do?
Love their kids fiercely. Literally, that's all I've been able to do is love them fiercely. One of the things that started me on this path, and this will probably sound like a really limited mindset with the way that gender's gone at the moment, but at the time I've obviously now changed the way that I say it. But I used to go, would I want my son loving his partner the way that his dad loves me? Would I love my daughter being loved the way that I was being loved? Would I want this relationship for either of them? And the answer was a firm no. I want better for them. The harder question, which does bring tears from a lot of my clients when I do push this with them, are you living the life you would want for your children? Most of them say no. So why the hell are you accepting this for yourself if you would not want your children to experience it? It's a hard one to answer. It's a hard one to be through. But if you're going into a job every day that you hate, would you want your children doing that? We always want what's best for our children. But hang on a minute. If we're not giving the best to ourselves, guess what we are showing them is acceptable? We are showing them that they can accept a less than ideal job, a less than ideal partner, a less than ideal life. And yet we want them to have the best. So how do we show them that they deserve that? There are times that, my kids will come in to me on a Friday night and I'll say to them, look, guys, I'm really sorry. I've made dinner and we'll sit down and we'll have a lovely dinner, but I'll go after dinner. I'm going upstairs. I'm having a bath. I'm not fit for human consumption because it's been a big week. I'll see you tomorrow and we'll spend time together then. Now, my old me would have felt guilty that I was doing that. But I now know they're going to get a better me if I do that. And we're going to have a better conversation the next day. We're going to have better connection the next day. We're going to have, more togetherness because I'm going to be fully present. And what I am demonstrating to them is it's okay for them to do that too. I don't need to say it to them because they're watching and they learn, monkey see, monkey do. And it's interesting. A lot of the nights I do that, I will have, once I'm back in bed with my book and I'm all tucked up, one of my kids will come up and they'll sit on the foot of my bed and all of a sudden we'll just have this massive conversation because they know that I'll be in a better space. And often they are bursting to tell me things that have happened through their week and all of this kind of stuff. So it's really what do you want to show them about how they should expect to be treated, about how they should expect to experience life? And making those choices. And often we find it easier to make those changes if we are doing it for someone else. And all of a sudden, one day it comes back, and all of a sudden you are realizing that you're actually doing it for you. You're not doing it for anyone else. And that is an incredible day. I remember one day, just a really quick story, my daughter, she was angry with me because I'd found a new partner who we've now bought a house together, and we've got our blended family and all the rest of it. But at the beginning, she had chosen to be my protector, and she did not like that this man was coming in and choosing to love me and protect me and all of that. One, she'd never seen me loved like that. And two, she had taken it on as her role, which it was never her role, of course. But that was her decision. And I went in and spoke to her, and she said, "You love him more than you love, my brother and me." And I said, "Oh, darling," I said, "No, I don't." I said, "You and your brother are always going to be the most important things in my life." And she looked at me with that, preteen look that any parents of preteens will know. And she went, "Mum, you love yourself first and foremost. So don't tell us we're the most important thing." And I said, "Oh, darling, you are absolutely right. I love myself first and foremost so that I can prioritize you and your brother. And you are right. If I don't love myself first and foremost, I can't be the mum that I'm becoming for you. And the way that I love you is very different from the way I love your brother, is very different from the way I love my partner. And if I loved any of you in the way I loved the other, you'd all hate it, because I'm not loving you in the way you need to be loved. So I said, that's the lesson for you, is I love you the way you need to be loved. I love your brother the way he needs to be loved, and I love my partner the way he needs to be loved." But it was just interesting that she liked to throw that little bit back in my face of that, you love you most.
Yeah, I love that, and it is, and we're going to move on. But I think we spent a couple hours just talking about what you just shared, because it's just, yeah, it's just so powerful, and you're just being such a great role model, and just taking care of yourself and loving yourself, just showing your children, everybody around you, kind of, and the standard's not the right word, but the standard that you've set for what you're seeking each and every day. And then putting that out there and say, hey, this is what kind of gets to be honored within my life each and every day. And appreciating that in yourself, and allowing people that you choose to enter that space and to feel that self-care and that self-love, and then to hopefully have them implement it into their life. And so I'm sure your clients are just so fortunate. And man, I think we could talk all day, and things that I want to talk to you about, but I know I'm going to let you explore, the difference. You can take either one of these kind of goal setting your clients with that versus vision board kind of creation. Which one do you want to kind of attack?
I'm going to change it up a little bit, if I may. I tend to work with intention. Okay. So the thing with goals that I find limiting is that obviously they're supposed to be SMART goals. They're, specific, measurable, attainable, blah, 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 time bound. Now, time is a construct. It's a human construct. Who's to say, if I set a goal, that it isn't supposed to happen tomorrow? Or what if I need to go through a bit of a journey first before that goal is the right thing for me? And who's to say that goal is even the right thing for me? Because that's my human interpretation of what I want to achieve. So I tend to work more with, I guess, looser goals. I call them intentions. What do I feel? So it's more looking at really tapping into that quantum field of energy and vibration. How do I want to feel when I achieve the things that I say that I want to achieve?
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
And don't lose your train of thought, but you've talked about much, and I should know more, but can you explain to the listeners the vibrations And what exactly do you mean by that? And then let's jump right back to where you were.
Yeah, of course. So in any, I mean, I don't know if people remember looking through microscopes when they were, in high school or whatever in science, and in the middle of cells there is still nothing. And when you look at a cell in a microscope, things are still moving. So even though we look like we are physical shaped beings, every cell is moving, every cell is vibrating. In tables, every cell is exactly the same. It's still moving and vibrating. It's just that it's a more dense thing, so we don't see the vibration. But to think about it on, I guess, an emotional or whatever, you feel someone, when they come into the room, you can feel if they're angry. That's not because they've come in and said, "Excuse me, I'm really angry right now." Sometimes they may not even have an angry look on their face, but you can feel the anger peeling off them. That is a vibrational field. Likewise, when people come in the room and they are happy, you can feel it. And that's the vibration we're talking about. Everything in this universe is energy and vibration. And the universe speaks in vibration, which is why I tend to avoid the harder set in stone goals and even the vision boards. I get that they work, but what is more important is the energy and vibration and the feelings it evokes in you. How do I want to feel when I am living my perfect life? And if I can embody that feeling today, and if I can keep that feeling sitting in my body and keep remembering it over and over and over again, then I embody being an abundant mental billionaire. So I am able to, when I'm walking the beach, I look around and I am going, I am living my best life. I have this amazing puppy who I love. I'm walking this gorgeous beach. I get to go and have a chai and have a little chat with my little community up at the cafe. And it's all high level stuff. It's, we don't go deep, but it's amazing. There's all the cold water swimmers there. I did that last year, but I haven't been able to get in the water. I've only done a couple of times this year, which I miss, but I love the icy plunges and everything. And then there's a couple of guys who regularly catch up, and it started during COVID. They'd go up and they'd get their takeaway, and because we weren't allowed to be inside cafes or anything, we'd all go up and we'd get our takeaway coffee and we'd all say hi, and it was our little bit of connection for the day. And it's just continued on. It's a beautiful place. And then I walk back and I'm going, I've got my warm drink. I'm throwing the ball for the dog. The waves are lapping or sometimes crashing, and saying hi to all my regulars and all the doggies. And I go, what else could I want right in this moment? I want for nothing in that moment. And the more I can tap into moments where I want for nothing, when I cook a beautiful meal for the family and we're all sitting around having a laugh around the dinner table, they are the moments that I try and get people to tune into more than setting goals or looking at vision boards. Because I often find that it's that energy and vibration. And if we are asking for things, we are asking from our limited human mind, and the universe is unlimited. So the more we can tap into our unlimited potential and bring those vibrations and feelings into our body and then push them out, we are saying to the universe, these are the energies and vibrations I want to live in. And then the universe knows what to deliver us. And let's face it, how many of the things that we ask for, we achieve that goal and we're like, oh, there's no excitement, there's no joy at finishing it. It was just like, oh, who's to say it was our goal? How many people are, working as lawyers or accountants or doctors or dentists because they were told to by their family? Do you think that when they got their degree, they were like, oh my God, I'm living my dream. This is amazing. I feel so incredible. Or are they like, okay, I've ticked the box. Now what? Now I've got to go get a job. Now I've got to do the next thing. And so we often live in this pursuit of happiness, or the happiness of pursuit, I should say, because we're trying to think that, well, at that next goal, when I achieve that next goal, I'll be happy. When I achieve that next goal, I'll be happy. When I achieve that next goal, I'll be happy. When I get engaged, I'll be happy. When we get married, I'll be happy. When I have my first kid, we'll be happy. When I have my second kid, I'll be happy. And you just go, when is that happiness going to come? But if we can embody happiness in this moment, then we are also training our brain in that neuroscience to look for more things that make us happy. And we're training our brain to look for more things that make us feel those feelings that we want to embody. And so that's the way I work. I kind of reverse engineer it rather than looking at what's the end result that I'm a change. If you're not enjoying the road to your goal, the goal isn't going to give you any pleasure. And that's the way that I try and work.
Love it. I love it. I have one quote that you'll like from Epictetus, and it's wealth consists in not having great possessions, but in having few wants. Just listen.
Yeah.
Want for nothing.
That's being a mental billionaire.
Yeah. Want for nothing. This led me to that. And then a question on the follow-up, huge into emotions. And I love just listening to you and occasionally having my 2 cents on this episode. But how do you help your clients tap into that? Because how often do you see that we kind of feel in our gut and viscerally, but we can't put our finger on what that is? And so knowing what we want, and knowing what we feel, not to sound however that sounds, but how do you help people kind of narrow down to really be clear with what it is that they're wanting to feel and what it is they're not wanting to feel?
I often don't like working in don't wants because our brain doesn't remember the don't. And so often when I ask clients, what they want, they will give me a whole list of don't wants. I don't want to be sick anymore. I don't want to, I don't want to feel unwell. I don't want to. And I get them to reframe and reframe and reframe. So I get a bit, panicky about their language because you need to be careful. What you are speaking is spells going out into the universe. So I get them really aware of their language. Things like I'm trying. Well, try and pick up the pen in front of you. You can't try. You either do it or you don't. So I'm careful of when I use the word try or should or might or can't. Those words that add pressure. Oh, I could have done this. Well, you know what? Yeah, you could have. I should have done it. Well, you should have, but you didn't. So therefore you made a choice. Bringing it back to choice, letting them know they have choice. Because so often we get stuck in those stress mindsets that we don't feel that we have a choice. We don't remember that we have a choice. So it's really highlighting that to them for a start so they become more aware. Awareness is key in all of it. It's like that, the first step in the 12-step program. The first thing is to admit you've got a problem. The more you admit, oh, hang on, I'm falling into that old problem again. How can I do this differently? How else could I think about this? How could I reframe that sentence so it's more positive? How can I change that don't want into a want? Instead of, oh, I don't want to wake up in the morning feeling tired, to I want to wake up feeling nourished and nurtured. I want to wake up feeling rested after sleep or whatever it is. There are always ways that we can shift our language and shift the way that we're saying things. So getting them aware of that, but also getting them aware of how these emotions feel in their body. When I always work in testing the emotion that's sitting there. So I've got heaps of emotion charts and I will use manual muscle testing to work out what emotion is sitting in the body. And sometimes the person's like, oh, that's a really strong emotion. Okay, so how about you tap into a word that you feel is more relevant, and I'll tend to dial it down a few notches. And after we've been discussing, you actually realize that they're just afraid to feel that really strong emotion. But by not wanting to feel, say, disgust or despair or grief or vengefulness or rage, people will try and tone it down. I'm a bit frustrated with them. No, you're not. You're suppressing your anger and rage at them because that's a more socially appropriate thing to do. But when we suppress these negative emotions, we also suppress the really positive ones. So we're not allowing ourselves to fully feel joy and happiness and ecstasy and awe and wonder. And my lows in some ways are lower these days, but my highs are so much higher. Because I'm not afraid to go to the low because I know it's a transient state. We can only hold an emotion in our body for 90 seconds before it changes into something different. And so being in that space, the more we can get friendly, those emotions are telling us things. They are giving us signposts of what we want more of and what we want less of. And even when people are in the depths of grief, we can tap in to how much love they had and therefore the reason they're feeling that grief. We need to be able to look not just at the duality, but at all of the possibilities that exist. And I think the more comfortable we get with that, and the more we realize that we don't need to, the emotion is not the problem. Our unresourceful dealing of it is the problem. The way that we shove it down and we try and suppress it, because then it just bubbles out somewhere else and ends up as emotional vomit or something over somebody at some point. Whereas if we're dealing with it in the moment, I've had a lot of times this year where I felt grief. My partner was in a car accident and literally survived by about an inch. I was in grief. I've also gone into a mode where I am seriously trying to control all of the minutiae because I had to move through the fact that I was scared. I was scared of losing him. I was scared of a lot of different things happening. But it took me a while to actually unpack the fact that it was the fear at the bottom, which was then creating the controlling behavior because I didn't feel safe. Now, okay, that was a big thing for me to move through, but I wasn't afraid to go there. I wasn't afraid to look at the grief of, even though I didn't lose him, of what it could have been to lose him. And then also to look at the moments of connection that we have had that have been intimate and tender and loving because we've had that close call. So it's about leaning into those tough emotions and finding people, professionals that can hold space for you as you navigate what that feels like for you. And then how do you want it to be instead? And this is where we bring our imagination in. We just need to imagine it and play with that imagination as much as we can until we fully embody the truth of who and what we are and what we want to be. Because I don't think that infinite wisdom, God, source, the universe, goddess, whatever you want to call it, do you really think that universal intelligence put us here to have a miserable life where we are suffering day in, day out? We are their children. Don't we just want what's best for our children? Don't we want to see them love, laugh, be happy, living their dreams? I truly believe that is what infinite wisdom wants for us. We just have free will choice and we don't always choose the right things. And we've got all this messy humanness and the conditioning and all that stuff that, messes those lines up sometimes. So every time I'm being nasty to myself in my head, I am effectively telling God they screwed up when they put me here. I don't think I've got that power. I don't think I don't think I've got the power to tell God that they made a mistake putting me here. So how about I accept the creation that they've made and see what good I can bring into the world with it?
I love it. And we're at, you kind of just.
I talk too much. I love this subject. I could talk all day on it.
Goosebumps. And yeah, we could talk all day, every day about this. But we're at the end of the show, and we always end with a great quote from John Alston. The only thing you take with you when you're gone is what you leave behind. And you kind of just spoke to it a little bit, but I'll give you another opportunity. Let's fast forward, 50, 60 years for you. You're surrounded by everybody that you love, and you're getting ready to take your last breath. What is it that you want to leave behind for the people that are still going to be there carrying on?
Is just live their best lives. Don't let fear be the reason that you don't follow your dreams. Because I wasted so much of my life letting fear control me. And now, you know what? I actually don't believe that God wants to see me homeless and on a street. So as much as sometimes, it's tough making ends meet, especially at the moment, as most of you, I'm sure most people are really resonating with. Do you know what? Just when I need it, more clients come through. And I have enough work. And I'm grateful for that. I don't believe that, that's where they want me to go. And so I make the choices that I can make to bring more love, more light into the world. And I think the more people can live by leaning into the good fear, the fear that leads us to our passion, our purpose, our destiny, and put some realism around that more negative fear of the ones that's holding us back and telling us to just stay in our little known comfort zones. That is the magic.
But we're on again with Amanda Kate. Find her at amandakate.com.au. She has a couple books out there: Divine Messy Human, Spiritual Guide to Prioritizing Internal Truth Over External Influence. There it is right there. And the Anxiety Relief Handbook. And she also has her podcast, so make sure you tune into that. Hello, Divine Messy Humans. It has been my pleasure to share space with you. Thank you so much for dropping so much knowledge on me. I got 3 pages of notes. And all of our listeners, again, we thank you for tuning in to another episode. Normally my Pasho gets us out, but boom, baby, that just happened. We out.